Thank you, Achan, and everyone for giving me a few minutes of your time this evening. Some of you may know that I was educated and have lived and worked in Paris, France before my marriage and moved to California. During my years in Paris, I would visit Notre Dame often as I was struck by its overpowering magnificence. The awe inspiring cathedral was my spiritual home. I loved to stroll in her gardens and walk along the river Seine after church. I still remember my first time walking into the cathedral. As I walked past the huge carved doors, I asked myself if I was worthy enough to enter this holy temple. What I saw made me dizzy, and giddy with joy. Every time I was there, I felt a sense of peace, calm, wonder, and joy. It's hard not to feel the presence of a supernatural power. It was a place where all my worries would melt and disappear. The sheer immensity of the cathedral, the soaring arches, the glorious sound of ringing bells, the silence, the shining rose windows, the chandeliers, and the soft light filling the church, all that beauty left me awestruck each time. The intricate patterns on the marble floors, the massive pillars, the walls, aisles, roof, and ceiling just took my breath away and lifted me up from my daily, ordinary life. When the sanctuary is lit by the light of candles and chandeliers, it's even more splendid. Sometimes I would tear up just by hearing the beginning note of music from the organ or the sound of a bell. I loved attending a mass or vespers there. The church was always open all day, and there were 5 daily masses, and on Sundays there were 7. Listening to the prayers and the songs by the choir was emotional and moving. It was like hearing the angels sing and pray. I will not be exaggerating if I said that attending a mass there for me was like seeing a vision of how heaven would look, feel, and sound like. The echoing of the words, voices, bells, and music is glorious. I felt the music moved through my being. Many times they would sing hymns in Latin, and I would not understand a word. Still, the songs had the compelling power to stir my soul. Some of the tunes of music are from before the revolution, so imagine how it feels listening to ancient music from past centuries. Also, those tones were specially made for the cathedral's acoustics. The music rings out of the walls. You don't just hear the sound of the bells, the songs, and the music of the organ. You begin to feel it, and it moves through you. It felt like the stones came alive when the heavenly music began to play. Between 30,000 and 60,000 people visited the cathedral every day. Sometimes while I was there, I would watch their faces. I saw the same sense of wonder, awe, and hope in the faces of believers as well as non believers. I saw a change in them as they made sense of what they saw. Some had the looks of astonishment, some were deeply absorbed, but everybody looked like they were blown away. I have felt that people left better than when they arrived. They might have walked in as tourists, but walked out as pilgrims. The living presence there, the presence of compassion and love, was perceptible not only to me, but everyone who visited. There is something magical and otherworldly about that church that cannot be put into words. The cathedral is truly alive and has a soul. For 850 years, Notre Dame has been giving its pilgrims a glimpse of the infinite, invisible God. The cathedral makes visible the love of God for mankind. When it was built in the 12th century, it was the largest, widest, and tallest church in Europe. It was built centuries before any country in North America, South America, or Africa was formally founded. It took 200 years to build. It has a priceless collection of artwork, paintings, sculpture, and statues. Notre Dame was where emperors were crowned. Napoleon was crowned there. Joan of Arc was beatified there. Many royal weddings and births were celebrated there. It is also the place where the funerals of almost all French presidents are conducted. Generations of kings, queens, important and famous people from all corners of the world, peasants and commoners, all have looked at Notre Dame in awe. It's a place where people from around the world became equals, no matter where they came from, which country they were born, or how rich or poor. Pilgrims, 600 or 700 years ago, walked for days, weeks, perhaps months to visit Notre Dame. Imagine their joy when they saw the soaring spire of the cathedral finally appearing on the horizon. Some call Notre Dame a living museum, some call it a historical monument because it has lived and breathed the most important moments of French history. For me, it is the sanctuary of the living presence of God. One thing that amazed me was that I never knew that Notre Dame was the most visited monument in the world. I thought in Paris or in France, Eiffel Tower was the most famous. If you compare it with the pyramids in Egypt or the Colosseum in Rome, the Statue of Liberty or the Lincoln Memorial in the United States, the visitors who visited Notre Dame every year, the numbers are just staggering. Everything in Paris, and indeed in France, is measured from this place. All towns, cities, road signs, and guidebooks are calculated from this spot. One could say that since all major roads in France lead to Notre Dame, Notre Dame is at the very heart of France. Notre Dame has been the historical, cultural, and spiritual landmark for 850 years. It dates back to 1163. It took 200 years to build. It's one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture, and needless to say, it's literally located in the center, in the heart of Paris. Now, what makes Notre Dame special in my eyes is its architecture, the flying buttresses, something called the forest in its roof, the sound of the bells itself, the organ, the music that fills the church, the rose windows that filter the light from outside inside, the gargoyles, the symbol. It stands for something, and that's one of the things that you look at before you enter the church, and of course the holy relics. These are some of the things that I want to share with you today. If you look at this image, there's a lot going on here, but I would like to call your attention to the spire. At the top of the spire was a rooster with pieces of relics from the crown of thorns. Now, crown of thorns is from the Passion of Christ that a French king bought from Jerusalem at a very high price. And they placed a small piece of the relic and other relics in the rooster high up in the spire as a spiritual rod, a lightning rod that protected all the parishioners inside the church. This is the main part that collapsed in the fire, but they found the rooster intact with the relics inside. It had not melted. It was miraculous. There were beehives on the top of the roof. They were still alive and not destroyed in the fire. The miracles are aplenty, even very recently, just after the fire last year. The damage was not as much as expected when the fire started. And if you had seen the images of Notre Dame burning last April, you know that it looked horrific and tragic. Everyone thought the church is going to fall apart to pieces and nothing will be left of the church. Coming back to this picture here, the lead roof, this is very heavy roof and it's in the shape of a cross, which means that inside the church the nave is in the shape of a cross. Now look at the pillars here. They hold the huge bells, 10 bells total, and it looks like the pillars were made at the same time, right? No, they were made 50 years apart, and one is slightly taller than the other. There are three entry doors to the cathedral, and they all have names and their own significance. This is called the portal of judgment in the middle. This is the portal of the Virgin, and this is the Saint Anne portal. And these are the flying buttresses that Notre Dame is very famous for in the world, because these are extra pillars that were constructed outside the wall of the church to support the roof. Now, when they first started thinking about building a church, they desired a huge church that was reaching out to the heavens. They wanted an enormous church that could hold thousands of people inside, and they needed the walls to be very high but thin with a lot of windows. Now, the question is, what do they mean by French Gothic architecture? So one thing is the height, and to maintain that height, they had to come up with some, engineering marvels called flying buttresses on the outside and ribbed walls on the inside. They have the pointed arches. They have large stained glass windows. They have a Latin cross shape inside. They have beautiful and intricate interiors and exteriors. Now remember, they wanted a church for a connection with God and to reaching up to the heavens. But for a large stone church with that much height, they had come up with some special building techniques that could hold the weight. So they had to figure a way to distribute the weight of the stone structures outside of the main walls. For this, they developed flying buttresses and ribbed walls for more flexibility in roof engineering. And Notre Dame is the first building in the entire world to incorporate flying buttresses. Many churches in Germany and England later followed in the Gothic architectural style. So if you see any church anywhere in the world with all these features, it's a French Gothic. As we spoke earlier, this is the bell towers with the bells inside. These are the flying buttresses. This is the roof. This is the spire, and this is the stained glass window. One thing I didn't talk to you about is something called the forest in its roof. Now, what it means is, you know, it's the beams that hold the roof of the cathedral, and each beam had to be made from a single tree, and each tree or each beam had to be of a certain height, a certain size, and they found a forest of oak trees, and they cleared 52 acres of that forest, and they bought it and placed it up in the roof here. Hence, the nickname forest. And at the time that they cut the trees and brought them here, the trees themselves were like 300 or 400 years old when they were cut. So we're talking about the 12th century. And so the cathedral contains one of the oldest surviving wood timber frames in Paris. Now try to imagine how they cut and brought all those 1,300 oak trees and took it up to support this roof here. What kind of effort it must have taken, what kind of leadership, what kind of people. Another special thing about the bell towers is that there is a spiral staircase inside, and if you can climb up 420 steps, you can go up to the bell towers and see some amazing views of Paris. You can see the gargoyles up close, and you can also see the bells inside the bell towers. Now, for centuries, Paris awakened to the sound of bells of Notre Dame. They are loud as thunder and as melodious as psalms. These bells are huge. There are 10 bells, and each bell has a specific name and purpose and rings only on certain holy days or for important occasions. Some ring daily for the chiming of the hours. There is one bell that rings only on New Year's Day at the stroke of midnight. Some ring to mark moments such as the papal visit or a head of state. Some ring only for royal weddings. The most famous bell is a 14-ton bell called Emmanuel that has tolled at most major events in the history of France, such as coronation of kings, papal visits, births of princes, marking the end of two world wars. It also rang in times of sorrow like funerals of French heads of state, tragedies such as the terrorist attack on 9/11 and on special holidays like Christmas, Palm Sunday, Easter, and Ascension. Since 1856, four major bells have rung every 15 minutes without skipping a beat, at least until last year, before the fire. And whenever there was a tragedy in the world, or now that it's closed, I'm saying was, within 1 hour, people would congregate outside the Notre Dame to pray, and the bell was rung to mark the moment. It is a place where the French get together in joyous and, more importantly, very sad times. This is the most famous angle of Notre Dame. Um, it's called the West Facade. So I want you to look at the bell towers which hold the 10 bells. I want you to notice this gallery of the Virgin. This is the gallery of kings, which represents 28 generations of the kings of Judah. And this is the portal of the Last Judgment, which depicts Christ's second coming. This is the portal of the Virgin, which depicts Mary's death and ascension to heaven, where she's crowned the Queen of Heaven. And portal of Saint Anne depicts the events surrounding Mary's mother. So all these finely detailed sculptures and statues were placed because in those olden days people could not read but understood by looking. And there is a lot of meaning behind all the stonework here. For example, let's say you were entering through this door, which is the door of Last Judgment. So you would think and you would remember that Christ is sitting to judge you, your life and actions. It is with this reflection that we are invited to partake in prayer so we can change our life and live a life that's pleasing to Christ, following in His teaching. So, this is a place that I would really love to hang out in. Sometimes I would just take a walk along the bridge here. There's a bridge here, or I would just walk here, or I would walk upstairs here. This was the place where I would arrange to meet friends. I would sit and just watch the sunset. If I was in a happy mood, I would, wave at the boats that were passing. And yeah, this is a very bustling place, and a lot of young people hung out here. You would see locals walking their dogs, tourists. It's like an amazing place, and it's pretty quiet, in spite of all that traffic and so many people. This was my quiet corner, apart from the gardens in the back. And this was like one of my favorite places to sit and just take in the city and just enjoy some moments outside the cathedral. So this is the Gallery of the Virgin. I want you to remember that there is, the organ that's right behind it, and I love the organ. This is the Gallery of the Kings. With the, means the 28 generations of kings of Judah. This is the three portals. This is just a close up of to show you the beauty of sculptures and details. Now, gargoyles. So, gargoyles are these very scary looking creatures, and they are meant to be scary because they are scaring away evil spirits. What it means is that they signify that there is evil in the world. Hence, come to church often and live a pure life. They are protectors and guardians of Notre Dame. Another purpose they serve is as rain gutters. They throw water far away from the church that would damage its mortar, stone, and woodwork. So they project rainwaters away from the building, so the water would like flow out of their mouth. If you look here, in the far distance is the Eiffel Tower, and this is the River Seine. There are like all these bridges that connect to the other side. It's called the left bank and the right bank and all that. This is the other famous gargoyle called the Strix. It has its face in its hands and it's just gazing at the city. So, legend has it that these stone creatures come to life at night. So, this is how it mostly is, like always crowded, a lot of people. Sometimes there are lines forming outside, but the lines like move very fast. Yeah, just remember this: the gallery of the Virgin, the gallery of Kings, and the three portals. Now, this is the central nave inside the church, and I want you to notice the beams, the pillars, the pointed arches, the high windows, the ribbed walls. Now, this style of ceiling is what allowed windows so high up in the walls. And these are the side aisles. So, what it means is you can walk around the aisle, go behind the altar, and then come back like this. And so you can walk all around the church. And there are separate chapels along this side of the church. And this is the altar, the cross, and La Pieta. So these are the chapels inside the cathedral, and these are the large artworks that belong to each chapel. Each is dedicated to a saint. There is space to sit and pray or light a candle if you wish. Um, let's look at the Pieta very close, up close. So, La Pieta means the descent of Jesus from cross. What do you see? I see the Virgin of Virgins, the Blessed Mother. She's sad, she's afflicted, she's tormented. The grieving mother is in agony. I see her weeping, compassionate soul through which a sword has pierced. Who would not weep seeing the mother of Christ in such agony? Sometimes my prayer would be like, just give me the grace to beside your cross, stand beside you under the cross, and just cry with you. This is the priest celebrating the Mass, and this is the view of the stained glass window. And very soon, in a second, I'll talk to you about this statue here. So, this statue is a 14th century statue of the Virgin and Child. It's called the Virgin of Paris. And I didn't know at the time, but there were a lot of people who would come forward and stand below it, sometimes kneel down and pray. And I also felt to do the same. I felt like I was called, though it's just a statue. And I would always make sure that I go up here and just spend a moment and just, pray and then always leave the church. Otherwise, I would always feel like something was incomplete. Now, every detail, every color tells a story here. These windows were carefully designed to give a message to the onlookers and please them. The colors held specific meaning. The color blue is the color of purity and of the Virgin Mary. The other dominant color, red, symbolizes the blood of Christ. There is symbolism in the shapes as well. The general population at the time were illiterate, as I told you earlier, and they knew how to read colors, pictures, and symbols to tell them stories that they were unable to read. An expert could spend more than an hour just explaining in detail all the forms and shapes and designs and the biblical scenes in these windows. This one is probably the window of the Virgin because the most predominant color here is blue, and the other window has like more red. So it has it's depicting um, the biblical scenes of Jesus. My favorite uh, the views of the church inside, the columns and the pointed arches, the chandelier and the rose windows. Even though common people like us cannot grasp the entire meaning, I feel that somehow we get the essence of the whole, that, the designers, the architects, the priests, bishops, or kings, whoever constructed this church building at the time. The historic organ. So, I want to talk about this organ here because the music played in this cathedral affected me emotionally. It had the power to make me happy and move me to tears. It helped me focus, concentrate, and immerse me deeper into prayerful thoughts. It made me realize how insignificant and lowly the things I worry about or think about are. It quickly snapped me out of my tiny world and my ego and my thoughts. It really felt like I was able to connect directly with God. The music from the organ would lift my heart and melt it in worship, in unison with the angels. The organ sounds incredible during the Mass, and when everyone sang together, it would feel like we, people from everywhere, were all bound together and united as one with Christ. The organ is thought to be the largest in France. It has 8,000 pipes and 5 keyboards. The amazing thing about this organ is that the sounds can go from barely audible to utterly deafening. I have heard that the pipe organ is the king of all instruments and the ancestor of electronic synthesizers and keyboards. The organist position here was one of the most is one of the most coveted in the world, and the organist who selected are they are like masters of music, as you can imagine. So this is the outside gallery of the Virgin. This is the window you're looking at here from the inside. This is the organ. This is where the organist would sit, and it has the keyboards and all that, uh, set up for him. This is one of the doors of entry. Just look at the beauty of these stained glass windows. So it would look different on different days and different times depending on the weather, the sunlight, etc. It is mystical because sometimes I had these experiences when I would enter the church and the light may have been dim or dull and it would be dark inside. And after a few moments in prayer, when I would open my eyes, it would be suddenly like bright, and sunlight would just pour in through these windows, and all the stained glass windows looked like they were lit up magically. It was in small moments like that I have felt a deep connection with God. The Some of the most important relics of Christendom, crown of thorns, which was worn by Christ during his passion, a silver a piece of the cross, a nail of the cross, are preserved at Notre Dame. Louis IX, a French king, purchased these relics at a great expense from a Latin emperor, and I think he brought it from Jerusalem. The crown of thorns is referenced as of 430 AD because before that they didn't have a tradition of worshipping the relics, and there is no other church in the world or any organization in the world which claims to have the crown of thorns. So it's believed that this is the most authentic, the original piece. The crown of thorns is not just locked away and was displayed once a month to the faithful. And so, apart from the crown of thorns, they had 200 other holy relics saved. I want to leave you with this image of the stained glass windows. Even if you don't remember anything else, just remember that Notre Dame is famous for these rose windows, and they are some of the largest rose windows that you will see around the world. Notre Dame still stands in an absolutely miraculous condition despite being engulfed by flames. Only the top roof is damaged while the bottom remained untouched. The cross still shines brightly on the altar. Notre Dame has always been a symbol of hope. Today, Notre Dame is even more a symbol of hope for Parisians and for people around the globe. Her presence is still important. She was loved before. I feel she has reached a new level of adoration now. This is not the first time that she has seen destruction. She was destroyed before during the French Revolution. Statues and some of the original bells were destroyed. Most of the original bells were melted for cannon and coins, except, for Emmanuel, the oldest one. Stained glass windows were broken. Some items from the treasury were stolen. So, still she recovered from all that. So, one thing I'm sure of is that she will be restored to her former glory again. It's just a matter of time. The Cathedral of Notre Dame is not just a French monument. I feel this church belongs to all mankind as a monument of love of humans for God. The heart of Paris, the heart of France, still beats for the world. When you visit Notre Dame in Paris, please remember to pray for me. And a pic of me in front of Notre Dame almost 15 years ago. Sorry, I closed my eyes. And another pic of me inside the church. Thank you.